hope and optimism is hard to come by these days. I'll make no bones about it. The disruption to what we used to count as everyday life goes on. Last year and the year before, at this time, it was COVID that disrupted Christmas. This year, just when we thought we were going to get a clear run at it, it's strikes. Massive industrial action. We've got a kind of a mini general strike. And on top of that, there's the cost of lockdown. All of it conspiring, combining to, I'm sure, many people listening to this feel under pressure, kept under pressure, like it's deliberate, filled with anxiety and uncertainty about the future, worrying about homes, keeping hold of your home, about heating your home, feeding your family, and all the rest of it. So I'm not just going to blithely say pin a smile on and it'll all be better, because I have to acknowledge that the last 2-3 years have taken their toll, and I think we do need to just face up to that. I couldn't help but notice last week, more headlines about falling birth rates here in the UK and all around the world. We're down in Britain now at slightly less than 1.6 babies per woman. To maintain the population, just to tick over, you need 2.1 babies per woman. So we're down at 1.6, and the lockdown seemingly has had a big effect on, well, fertility, but perhaps more accurately, people's enthusiasm for having babies at the moment. China's down at 1.2. They've had their one-child policy and all the rest of it, but they're barely making one baby per woman, and that is a population that's destined to fall off a cliff. Between now and by the end of this century, let's say. And it's worth noticing. We talk readily now. All the countries across Europe are at less than 2. They're all down around 1.5. And you've only got to look back to 1950, when women in the UK on average had 4.7 children. That was the birth rate in Britain as recently as 1950. Now that's a little bit before my time. I was born in 1967, but still, it's hardly out of reach in the depths of history. And I would say that apart from anything else, there are lots of reasons that we'll get to, but I think a falling birth rate like that around the world it speaks about a lack of confidence in the species. It's a species that's lost confidence in the world and in the very idea of the future itself. And I think about it because it's Christmas time, and Christmas, for those that care about the central message of Christmas, is about a family, and it's about the birth of a baby. It's about the birth of the baby Jesus. And so, it seems like an apt time to contemplate the importance of the profound message of hope that is the Holy Family, the story of Jesus and Joseph and Mary, and to set that in a context of falling fertility and falling birth rates. As I say, it's everywhere. It's all across the world. It's in Asia, it's in Europe. Actually, in Sub-Saharan Africa, the population is booming. It's predicted to treble by the end of the century. Nigeria would become the second biggest country on the planet, with something like 700 or 800 million people. So there isn't an absolute uniformity to it, but it's all over the Americas, it's all over Europe, it's all over Asia. There's 23 nations, including Spain, Japan, are expected to see their populations half by 2100. By the year 2100, if things don't change, and if the modelers are correct, the populations of 23 countries will be cut in half. At the moment, it's predicted that the global fertility rate will fall below 1.7 by 2100. And that, in brutal terms, that means globally the species, Homo sapiens, won't be producing enough babies to survive. We'll be counting down to zero if the situation doesn't change. Now, there's multiple reasons for it, and in many respects, they're things that most rational people would consider positives. You're talking about better economic prospects. Where people aren't scrabbling hand to mouth all the time. They don't keep producing children for all sorts of reasons. So where people are in stable economies, where there's lower infant mortality. You walk through a Victorian graveyard in this country, and you look back at the Victorian period, and you see those lists of babies that people were burying. Married couples were losing, so many infants. So we've only just relatively recently got on top of that ourselves here in a first world country. But also, there's greater equality between the genders, not everywhere, and it's not uniform, of course it's not. Better education, access to contraception, all of these things that no one's going to put their hand up and say those are bad things. However, they are contributing, and have been for a lot of years now, to this falling birth rate around the world. I mean, so the falling fertility, it's not about sperm counts or any of that necessarily, although that might be playing into it. It's other factors. And then, of course, on top of that, you've got the, what I always see as the anti-humanness of the green message. You listen, you go online, you look at YouTube, and you can find one young woman after another saying that they're not going to have children because they think it's better for the planet. That they're contemplating childless futures for a variety of reasons, but in many cases it's because they've learned or they've internalised the idea that the species is bad for the planet, and that therefore they don't want to contribute to it. They don't want to add to the human population. They don't want to make other little human beings that will grow up to be big human beings who are yet more of a draw on resources. And I find that tragic. I think that's an existential crisis, if ever there was one. And I don't look at it. I've never subscribed to the notion that more people is more problems. I think more people is the potential for more solutions. Our species existed without anything for hundreds of thousands of years because there were never enough of us at the one time. Brilliant ideas might have been kindled briefly, but without others around them to share them with and kindle that idea into a fire, literally to begin with, but other ideas that need to spark into being, but they need other people. For want of people around them, those ideas just, winked out into the darkness again. And it was only in 1800 that we got to a global population of 1 billion. And then you see what happened after 1800. Came all of the advances, all of the advances in industry and agricultural revolution, technology, medicine, all of it came because finally there were enough people producing more people to come up with the answers. You've got to get away from the idea that more and more people combining to make more and more people and more ideas is always a bad thing. That's wrong. It took our species thousands of years to learn how to combine just two elements, copper and tin, to make bronze, and that enabled the Bronze Age. That changed the world forever. I mean, to some extent, we're still living in the shadow of the Bronze Age. Now, there are 100 elements. You imagine if you only bring 2 together at a time, what you get. Imagine if you start combining 4. Imagine if you start combining 50. So where you've got 8 billion people alive on the planet today, the ways in which those people can come together to create the solutions to everything. For me, that's the future. It's not less people, it's at least as many, and maintaining that number. Or I think there's an argument to be made for it. Everyone is under pressure to have a career. And for some reason, everyone's supposed to find happiness and satisfaction in a career. And I'm not convinced that everybody, men or women, have been made happy by having careers. Now, that model, it comes from that business model. I don't believe in communism. Communism's always a disaster. Capitalism, in some forms, has, however, lifted billions of people out of poverty, and it has made the modern world. But just like communism, capitalism can be abused and misused. And something, late stage capitalism is not working well for us. The idea used to be that you worked in order to have the money to consume stuff, to buy things. But in this latest iteration of the whole thing, we now have to consume more and more, faster and faster, so that there are jobs at all. We now have to consume and throw away and use and throw away more and more in order that jobs exist in the first place. So that's the cart pushing the horse. That's completely back to front. So something has gone badly wrong, but it's different now, and it's going to be increasingly different. Jobs are going to disappear, replaced by artificial intelligence and the new technologies, and fewer people among us will acquire skills quickly enough to keep up with the machines and the artificial intelligence. There will be a constant loss of, there'll be jobs for a while, and then those jobs will be replaced by artificial intelligence, and those people will have to retrain again in some other niche profession or skill. That's going to be very difficult for people to contemplate, and to some extent I just feel as if we've all been had. We were promised. We were promised for the last 100 years and more that jobs and careers were the route to happiness for men and then for women. But more and more work just to pay the bills and the mortgage means less and less family life. And that whole idea of women who obviously have always borne the brunt of childcare, but for women to go out to work outside the home, that's predicated on them finding other people, probably women, to care for their children for less money than the woman who's leaving the house earns. So that's by definition exploitative. So that I can go out and earn more money, you will have to earn less money than me for taking care of my children. And it's true of the elderly as well. The people in society that look after the youngest and the oldest get the lowest pay. And there's got to be something seriously upside down and inside out and back to front about all of that. So, how do we fix it? Is anyone trying to fix it? The problem of the falling birth rates. Well, according to the UN, the United Nations, 2/3 of countries across Europe have brought in measures to try and increase fertility, and it's things like offering people bonuses for babies. In places like Poland and Russia, young couples are offered extra cash for every baby they have. And there's more, there's parental leave, so that people get paid to take care of children and to have children. And it's having, varying degrees of success. But something's got to be done because, well, obviously I've said this before on here in other contexts. Elon Musk says falling population is a bigger threat to the species than climate change. We're going to be undone not by the climate changing. We're going to be undone by there not being enough of us. Because we're all going to have ageing populations. We're going to have, closer and closer to half of every population is going to be elderly people who don't work, and so aren't earning money, and so aren't paying tax. And there aren't going to be enough younger people in employment paying taxes to take care of all of those people. So, but these are economic considerations. I would say the falling birth rate it signals the death of hope. It's a warning light flashing red hot from the future that we can see from here and that we have to do something about. And it changes everything if people aren't having families. If you've got a generation coming through that have no children and that have no reason therefore to be married and to form those kind of relationships, then you get some kind of hyper-liberal future. And I don't know what that might look like, but let's just concede that it would be very, very different from what we've got now. If all the young people coming through are just renting, if they're just single, if they're just dating, if they're just using dating apps, society is going to change radically. And again, it all's going to come down to, are people happy? And if not, why not? And it's increasingly apparent that having stuff isn't the answer. Being able to buy stuff is not the answer. People need meaning in their lives. Like we didn't know this thousands of years ago, but we've kind of brushed it under the carpet or pretended it's not true. And we've been pretending it's not true that people need meaning in their lives because the uber capitalists and the people with most of the money and most of the power want it that way. They don't want people demanding meaning in their lives and seeking meaning in their lives. They just want a less than perfectly educated mass of population that they can use. Which brings us to Christmas. Every year at Christmas, if you're a person of faith or even if you're just aware of what the story is, you're invited to think about the birth of a baby and the making of a family by the birth of that baby and the hope that comes with the baby. And it's a profound and important message because every baby should symbolise hope, and a newborn baby is literally an investment of hope in the future, and it's about commitment to and confidence in that future, because you're saying by having a baby that you're expecting a future in which that baby will grow up to be a functioning adult. So it's a commitment to and a confidence in the future in the most real sense imaginable. And I was thinking as well that just this week past, on Wednesday, we had the longest night, shortest day. And every year for thousands of years, people in the northern latitudes have marked the longest night because they've been aware of it, because in the dark, it's hard to be hopeful. And you need consciously to rekindle hope. And once the longest night is past, we know that the sun is on its way back to us. And every day, depends exactly where you are, but every day you get an extra minute or maybe 2 minutes of light every day. It's only a sliver to begin with, but it matters because it accumulates and a steady drip fills the bucket, as my father-in-law always says. And all the great faiths focus on light. Diwali, right, which comes out of the subcontinent and elsewhere, it usually comes with a harvest, and it celebrates new beginnings, and it's fundamentally about the triumph of good over evil and light over darkness, hence all the lights. And every lamp lit, it symbolises the coming of knowledge, or the coming into knowledge from the darkness of ignorance. That's what the lights are. The Jewish faith has Hanukkah, and Buddhists, in December or January, they celebrate Bodhi Day, which is it's about enlightenment, literally the enlightenment of Buddha. Native Americans in Mexico, have a ceremony called or a dance called Xalaco, which it's about the return of the light. It focuses around the winter solstice, and for a few days there's dancing and festivals, and what it foreshadows and what it looks forward to is the rebirth of the sun. And then obviously we've got Yuletide, which is the feasting around the darkest months of the year, the lighting of lights, the feasting, the coming together. And so at this time of year, I would say, when hope can feel hard to come by, and when the nights are dark and there's still a lot of dark nights to get through, it's important to focus, as the Christmas story tells us, on the fundamental importance of the family. And families are made by the coming of babies. And that's what the Christmas story is all about. And the societies that give us meaning, the civilizations that give us meaning, are those that are centred on family. And the more of those families that can rely on one another, that creates community. And community is what gives meaning. And that's why we should value Christmas. The last couple of years you would hope, will have reminded as many people as possible of that. That, what people missed and what people felt had left a hole in their lives was the absence of others. What ruined it and what threw people for a loop and what brought on all the depression and the anxiety was that people couldn't get together with the people that they loved, be it family or whatever constitutes family in your life. The enforced absence, the enforced loneliness, that was the problem. It wasn't not getting a flat screen TV or a new phone or an iPad. It was nothing. Those were not the things that threw people and broke people or came close to breaking people. It was being separated from one another, being told not to go to the pub, being told you couldn't go to a restaurant, being told you couldn't go and visit your mum and dad. Those were the things that ruined it for people. And so that the great lesson there, the great reminder, is that Christmas is about family. It's about one family in particular and the birth of one particular baby. That's the message, Jesus. However, it is also, by extension, a reminder that what really matters and gives most people meaning in their lives is family. And where families live together, side by side, cheek by jowl, that is community. So it's family and community that give us meaning and get us through the dark and keeps the lights burning and the fires on.